We'll call the meeting back to order. We'll follow up on agenda item 2.11. Sorry. Oh. Yes, we can carry on. He'll rejoin us shortly, I'm sure.
Madam Reeve, just a second before we get the resolutions. So just for councils, we can discuss while we get everything set. But ultimately, just a quick recap of our discussions today. So obviously staff are moving for the Bs and everything into discretionary, so it will all be discretionary. We had also talked about, Taylor, I'm just recapping, so if you'd like to recap what we discussed.
Apologies, Council, that took a little longer than I anticipated.
Do you need more time or?
I think I've captured everything that was discussed, and what I'll do is I'll pull up a copy that shows the amendments and then the amending resolutions, and we can go through one by one here.
Excellent, thank you.
Madam Reeve and Council, we can kind of hold this down and move to something else if that would suffice. Are we good? Okay. Pardon me, I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
First here was under the definition for backyard hens, removing the stipulation that they must meet a minimum age requirement of 16 weeks. We've taken that out of the definition as proposed. Under the backyard beehive definition, we've changed the wording, which I'll read out here for council. It means beekeeping equipment inhabited by live honeybees that includes a bottom board and cover for personal use, a maximum of 1 backyard beehive containing no more than 4 supers. See backyard beehive super definition. That is located in the rear yard of a lot. The entrance of the backyard beehive is directed away from the adjacent residential properties. Backyard beehive does not mean livestock or agricultural operation, and as permitted per backyard beehive has been removed from that definition as well. And this will support us as having it as a discretionary use, which I'll show a bit later here. Part 4, development permits not required, 4.2.9 backyard beehives has been removed from the bylaw, as this will now be a discretionary use in the selected land use districts. Under Part 7, General Regulations, 7.5 Animal Controls, Section 7.5.1, the Eagle Lake Restricted Residential District has been removed. This will allow for backyard hens and beehives in that district as a discretionary use. Under Part 8, Specific Use Regulations, Section 8.1, Backyard Hens, there's a title adjustment here. Development permit applications must include has been changed to development permit application requirements. Under the general requirements section, we have removed again the stipulation that the hens must be 16 weeks or older. And then lastly here, under Part 9 of the Land Use District, Section 9.12, this is the Hamlet Residential General District. We've added backyard beehives as a discretionary use and backyard hens as a discretionary use. And under Section 9.18, we've added back in the Eagle Lake Restricted Residential District. And here you can see in red, we've added backyard beehive and backyard hens as a discretionary use. And those were all of the amendments that we captured in our earlier discussion. Are there any more changes or additions at this time?
I'm satisfied.
Yeah, excellent. I think that captured everything that we discussed. Thank you. And in terms of motions, we could do a resolution for second reading, and that would include the amendments that were just shown.
As presented.
As presented.
Yes, as presented. And I do have that up on the screen here.
Yep, I see as amended. So everybody's clear that if somebody moves this motion, it would include the amendments that administration has just shown, just presented.
I'll move that council move second reading of bylaw 2021-34 as amended. This being a bylaw for the purpose of amending land use bylaw number 2016-01 as shown on the attached Schedule A.
There's a motion on the floor. Questions and discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
I'll move that council move third reading for bylaw 2021-34 as amended. For the purpose of amending land use bylaw number 2016-01 as shown on the attached Schedule A.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, and thank you for all your work on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We will move to 2.31, Wheatland Housing Management Body Requisition. Councillor Laverson.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up at the last meeting that Shannon and I were at. There's our understanding is the requisition has been made to the county, but the county has not paid that yet. So we're just wondering if you can provide us an update on why that is.
For sure. So through the chair, so there's kind of a couple just steps I have been considering prior to the issuing this payment. So at the fall RMA convention, there's a resolution passed and brought forward by Wheatland County that was passed. I'm trying to think of the exact wording of that resolution. However, it did have housing board members following the legislation that's currently in place. So I had been emailing back and forth the CAO at the WHMB, and I did print off the email and I can circulate it to council as well. So what I am following is the Housing Act Section 7, which is the requisition. So within that section of the legislation, a housing board is to requisition municipalities for a previous year's surplus or deficit, plus any amount either to establish or maintain a reserve. So that was something that had been brought up in the past that maybe, I'm not sure if it was being done or we were just wondering if it had been being done. So I did ask the CAO at the board if that had been done. So I did email her on the 23rd of February, just asking her, is the WHMB intending on utilizing the 2021 deficit surplus to calculate requisition as per the Housing Act, Section 7, Sub 1, Sub A, to calculate the requisition. And then I just mentioned the previous history when that requisition had, or the financial statement had been approved. Then I just said the deadline is April 30th, so that will be ample time to calculate an accurate number for the requisition. Her response was on February 23rd that the WHMB hopes to have the audited statements by early March. This will allow for an accurate number for the municipal requisitions to be completed and sent by April 30th. And then I said, okay, just so we're on the same page, the county will wait until a new requisition is approved by the board incorporating the 2021 surplus deficit. Once we get that with the calculation, we will pay it. And then their CAO responded, have a great day. So then yesterday I received an email just noting that our requisition was due at the end of April. And I asked, did the board approve an updated requisition including the deficit/surplus plus reserve amounts as per our conversation back in February? I believe this was to be approved at the April 14th board meeting. And then her response was, no, there is no update on the requisition. The board stood by the requisition amount that was presented in the motion. Policies for these motions are presently being discussed. So I ultimately, this is kind of up to council. Like my role is kind of just to advise on acts and legislations that do exist. So the cautious side of me just says that, you know, I've highlighted the section of requisition under the Housing Act, and I'm not sure if that prior year's surplus or deficit has been followed. They're supposed to provide a calculation that's also in their legislation as well. I don't have that. However, council can get me ask me to proceed with the payment. Really, it's ultimately up to council. Council did pass a motion that went to the provincial meeting as well, so I'm guessing that it's probably not what they want to do, but ultimately I'm at the will of council as well. Just as if I were to advise on the MGA, I just kind of let you know your options and council can proceed that way. Thank you.
So you received a number from them saying, here's our requisition, but it didn't have the calculation of what their deficit was from the previous year and what amount they were hoping to have for a reserve. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's right. So I received this number in February, so the audited statement wouldn't have been approved even at that point. So I did ask, and they said they were going to incorporate it. And then I just kind of heard back today that they're not going to incorporate it.
That doesn't really clear anything up, does it?
Well, so I think in our meeting, there was discussion about the reserves and what the right amount for a reserve was. So I think from the Housing Board's perspective, we don't know what a reserve amount should look like.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the reserves that the Wheatland Housing Board has, and that they're continually getting more without using it, it looks like, in the past few years. So I think the Housing Board still needs to determine what their policy is about holding reserves. We had a discussion about some capital projects in the next 10 years, I can't remember how many years. So they have some idea of what costs are going to be in the next little while, but I'm not sure that. So I'm still learning about this process, and so from the lodge's perspective, basically the Alberta government pays them to run the lodge, correct? And then if they just happen to have some extraneous costs, that's what this reserve is meant to cover. So that would be not just replacing floors and things that happen on a regular scheduled kind of there's a capital replacement plan or whatever. So I still think, yeah, I don't think the housing board knows yet, has decided what the reserve amount should be. So until we do know that, how can we ask council, Wheatland County, to pay an amount that's just based on historical? This is what we always ask for. So I still think, yeah, I think the housing board has work to do. So I'm not sure exactly how council should, given that our requisition is due at the end of April, I don't know what the correct.
Yeah, I mean, and I've only been to 2 meetings, so
I know,
that's why I'm trying to play catch up.
And
here.
honestly, I'm still learning too. I've been poring over
Yeah.
the acts and the regulations, and
I know what
only
their,
now
their
getting an
plan
understanding.
is. They want to have a, I think it's 5-year requisition thing out to all the municipalities so that there's no surprises, so people can plan budgets. But I don't know that they're there yet. And I think there is. I mean, you can't run asset management for floors and ovens and whatever else went out the other day, like you can for the building itself in general, right? There's operating maintenance and then there's asset management. So I don't know that's. I don't know if they're. I couldn't figure out how the reserves were designated the other day.
Yeah.
But is that something that's really important that the county has to know ahead of time?
So from administration's perspective, no. The WHMB is an autonomous board that should operate as an autonomous board. The only thing I'm really looking at is the Housing Act Section 7 is just, a second. Oops. Just had it pulled up. So the way I'm kind of just interpreting it is that, like, to my understanding, which I don't work entirely out of the Alberta Housing Act, but I have reviewed Section 7 because it is really relevant to me specifically as an administrator, is that I don't think they're incorporating the surplus or deficit into their calculation. I've asked for the calculation, and we just kind of get that summary sheet, just the total amount, and then it's based off equalized assessment, which is great. That's how they're supposed to do it if there's no other way stipulated. But then subsection 4 specifically states that management body shall provide a copy of its estimates and copy of its calculation of the requisition amount to the municipality. So then, just further to that, I'm kind of just struggling on the clarification when I emailed on the 23rd, just saying we'll wait until a new requisition is approved by the board, and then acknowledgement that the email was received, and then just get an email on the weekend saying that it's just due at the end of April. So I'm kind of, it could just be a communication thing. I'm not quite sure, but ultimately I'm just kind of trying to follow that legislation, and yeah, ultimately that's it.
Somewhat helpful.
Deputy Ruth Clausen.
So I've never sat on the housing board, but I've heard this discussion. It's been ongoing here on and off for a couple of years. And I think the requisition about just a general high view has always been the same. And there's been reserves built up, and I've seen it happen on other boards too. And the public asks, why do they have so much reserve? So we're stewards of tax dollars. So if there's a calculation, and then we look at the Housing Act and it shows that there should be a certain thing that may or may not have ever been done before, but it's there. Why don't we do it the right way? And I think that's the approach, at least that I felt council was doing. And with the feeling of going to RMA was we're not the only ones out there that there's other municipalities that have that same thing. We just want to be able to justify that cost. And there's some steps that I think that the boards have to do to justify that. Whether or not that's being done, it's not for me to decide, but it sounds like our administration is asking for it and we're not getting it. So. And I don't know why. I honestly, it's cart before the horse before the cart. I don't know, but the regulation says we should do it. We should be doing it the right way. Then there's no question. Maybe I'm seeing it differently, but it's just from an outside observer to this for a few years. And we've asked it several times.
And just a note to clarify, So the end of April, I'm just trying to understand when how that date was established. I'm kind of looking at some emails just kind of back and forth, and so on February 18th, I noted that I just received a requisition from the Housing Board, and the legislation notes that a municipality, and this is under Section 7, subsection 5 again, a municipality shall pay the management body the amount requisitioned within 90 days after the mailing of notice by the management body. So, like February, March, April. So, I just kind of, I think it's still even prior to that 90-day window. So I'm kind of just maybe need some clarification on that date as well. I could email their CAO and ask. Yeah, I just...
April 30th is not there's no regulated, legislated date.
The Act represents April 30th, but that's the deadline in the Act for the housing management body to requisition the municipality.
I see.
And then the Act references that the municipality has 90 days from, as Brian just said, the mailing of the requisition.
So maybe if the board members could just ask some clarification for...
There might be confusion around that.
Yeah,
but,
just
yeah.
if we can get clarification.
That's why I wanted to discuss it here, so that Shannon and I have something we can take back to the next board meeting.
Yeah, I could email you guys a copy of the Housing Act as well, and reference that subsection as well. Sorry, tongue twister.
CAO Henderson, if you could include the regulation as well, just because they do, they're applied together.
I already have both of them, but that's fine. It's just a matter of time of understanding, learning from it. A question though, so given that we want to build a new building, would a reserve fund be used for something like that, or is that like above and beyond, or do we have any? I wish I knew more about this, honestly.
So a reserve fund typically, sorry if I'm speaking out of turn.
Please do.
A reserve fund should be approved by the board, established and approved by the board. So if a housing body wants to establish and approve one, they totally have the right to do that. It just should be approved by policy and outline the clear, concise details of the reserve. The county has, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to say around 25 reserves. And we have a policy for each of them. I am hoping to streamline that a little bit, but it's important to have a clear, concise policy, approved policy on what they're used for.
Okay, so that is something that they are actively working on. So hopefully we'll get something we can base our decisions on, I guess. All right.
I think from the county side, we know.
Councillor Eckert was first, then we'll go
Yeah.
to Deputy Reeve Clausen.
This is directed to administration, and I have the Housing Act in front of me, so I'm looking at on requisitions number 7, and there's have an A and a B, right? So they're not A and B, they're A and, so we could theoretically, while the housing board is trying to figure out how to set up a reserve fund and all that kind of stuff, we could requisition the amount of the annual deficit from the previous year. We know that number now, right? So we could send them a check for the annual deficit, and then they could come back with getting how they're going to set up their reserves and that, because I do not believe they have a reserve fund set up.
So that the Act does say to establish as well. So if they're in the process of establishing one, but ultimately that calculation should come from the WHMB. That's something that we shouldn't be involved in. I can certainly offer assistance. Like, I really don't mind. We're just hoping to kind of follow that section on requisitions.
Great. Well, that was helpful. If it looks like they need some help figuring that out, thank you for offering to help with that. But I would kind of hope that the board can figure that out.
Deputy Reeve Clausen.
And to publicly speak, we do have a rough idea what that is, and it's budgeted for. Mm-hmm. Just want to make sure that it's done to the best way we can, and like I said, we're responsible for taxpayers' dollars. And if a board so chooses to have a fund and they want to fund it, we need to have a rough idea what it's there for. And I know that in the past there's been some kind of I don't know if it's opposition to us knowing why it's there, but I mean, it is public money. So you got to have you just can't have money for no reason. You got to have it justified. In this day and age, I think that's very fair.
Yeah, and I didn't get a sense of urgency from the rest of the board at that meeting, but I think there is maybe, there isn't the same understanding of how the autonomy between the two, like that board and the county works. So maybe it's just even we could, which reminds me, did we get a copy of that Brownlee presentation that we had in the ECC where they were talking about the autonomy of boards? Because that could answer a lot of questions if I remember right.
Yes, we did. So we had a recording, but I believe the recording is just for internal purposes only. But we can definitely share that link with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
But Brownlee had a PowerPoint deck or something up there too. Did we? Oh, did you? Oh, let me just look. It's entirely possible I missed it.
Question to administration, have we received a copy of the annual financial statements from the housing body?
I did request one, but I got an internal document. I didn't get the actual audited statement for Gregor Harriman, and I just never followed up. I guess I probably should have, but I just didn't.
So just for the board members as well, that is referenced in the Act as well, under Section 15 2B, that all municipalities should receive a copy, or a management body shall forward the annual financial statements together with the auditor's report prepared under Section 14 to the Minister A, and B, all municipalities that the management body requisitioned for that fiscal year or that made contributions to the management body under Section 8 for that fiscal year. Not later than 90 days after the end of the fiscal year to which the financial statements relate. It'll help our administration ensure that we're aligned with legislation.
Which we should always be doing.
Absolutely.
That's our kind of.
And that was honestly the sort of the impetus for the resolution, was just because we are responsible for tax dollars, just that we are aligned with the legislation. Yeah, that was it. Any other questions or discussion on that topic? I don't know that we need a motion at this point.
No, I just wanted some information.
Some clarification. Okay.
Just
Deputy Ruth Clausen.
when I think about this, and I know Lodge wants to build a new lodge. I get that totally, but questions that come to my mind sitting here, just so you know where my mind goes, is how much is the operation cost on the new facility? What's the estimation on it? So we have an idea, knowing here, sitting here, what you can make the best decision possible. So if there's a huge deficit operational wise in the future, we know what that's going to cost our taxpayers roughly. Not that we have much control over it, but it's and you can do that work prior to. You can do estimations, you can do all that kind of stuff. That's where I come from, and I think it's just good to do the work.
So we've hired a consultant to do some financial analysis, and I'm not sure if that includes the operating. I will find out about that.
Just before we go on, question to administration, should we have had motions to accept the presentations from the RCMP? Probably, hey?
Yes, we should have.
Okay. My apologies, everybody.
I should have said something.
If we could have a motion related to 2.21 to accept the presentation as information.
Also move.
Councillor Eichert has moved. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. If we could also have a motion for 2.22.
Also move.
Councillor Laprise has moved. Questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll now move to 2.42, Council Resolution Tracker.
Yes, good afternoon, Council. Brian from Administration. On page 154 of your agenda package is the Council Resolution Tracker. So the Resolution Tracker starts on page 157. It is there for your review. If there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for CAO Henderson?
I'll make the motion that Council accept the Council Resolution Tracker report dated April 19, 2022 as information.
Deputy Ruth Clausen has moved. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to 2.43.
Yes, good afternoon, Council. Brian again from administration. So on the on page 165 of your agenda package is just board representative appointments. So just with the removal of Councillor Kester from the previous boards, we'll just need to appoint new members. And then administration is also seeking clarity on appointments to the Municipal Planning Commission, the local seed cleaning plant, the Wheatland Regional Partnership Committee, and the Fire Association meetings regarding the appointments and resolutions kind of in questions. So they are appointed at the annual organizational meeting. So everything should be there for council to kind of consider. And that's all administration has to present. Thank you.
Just a question for clarification of council, I guess, would be, we have alternates on all these boards, so my assumption would be that the alternates would bump up and we're replacing alternates?
Council can replace with alternates. It's just at the discretion of council.
So I think if the alternate is willing to step onto full-time on the board, then we can do that route. And if they would prefer to stay as alternate and somebody would like to move into, like, assume the main position, they could remain as alternate. We have some flexibility there. We'll start with Wheatland and adjacent district emergency medical services.
Could we just say who's currently on the board, because I don't have all that.
I did bring the sheet Brian circulated. Councillor Bigger.
I'm not sure if I did circulate that.
I think you did by email. It would have been last week, I think.
The alternate for Wadesma is Councillor Larson.
Yeah, and Councillor Bigger currently serves. Councillor Larson, would you like to move on to the board position?
Yes.
Okay. And would somebody like to step into the alternate position?
We got to nominate somebody, or did somebody just say? Or?
People can volunteer, you can nominate, you can, however, I think we did it sort of somewhat casually before. If people were interested, they stated their name. If there's, I guess we could ask if somebody else is interested on the board position. We can essentially do it just like we did the organizational meeting, where if there's more than one person interested, you can do a secret ballot. We can follow the same process. So I'll ask, is there anybody else interested in sitting on the Wademsa board? Okay. So then...
Excuse me, so that is the alternate?
I just asked if anyone else wanted to sit on the board, or yes, or alternate.
So sorry, I'm not following. So this is for Wademsa?
Yes.
And we already have, Donna is
Yes.
the primary?
Yes.
And Rick is the alternate?
Yeah.
So we need,
He's agreed to sit on the board.
Yes.
I think there's two people that sit on the board, correct?
oh, there's two, I'm sorry.
Yes, so
I get it.
There's two. Councillor Larson is the alternate. You just need a motion to appoint him as the full time.
Take a look at
And-
just Google Wheatland County committee chart. Look up
So
what's
the
there.
committee chart is actually pulled up on this screen, and
Can you get it down?
I might have pulled it off the website. I apologize if it wasn't emailed. I may have pulled it off of the website. So I just knew I had it.
We definitely got an email at one point in time, but it wasn't last week that I can see.
So looking for somebody who would consider sitting as alternate.
I can sit as alternate.
Okay. So question to administration, could we do a two-part resolution for each board, appointing the member and then the alternate?
yeah.
Okay, if somebody is prepared to make that motion.
Or to appoint Tom Eichert as Wheatland County Representative to Wheatland and adjacent.
No,
No.
we're going to...
Councillor Larson as representative and Councillor Eichert as alternate.
to appoint Councillor Larson as Wheatland County Representative to Wheatland and Adjacent District Emergency Medical Services Association for the remainder of the 2021-2022 term.
And you can,
We can just vote on each one. We'll just, if council's okay with that, we'll go board by board.
Well, no,
And
but
then-
but you could
add Tom Baker
add
as
me as
alternate?
alternate.
Oh, sorry, I thought you did already. Mary.
And
In
further-
addition to add Councillor Tom Eichert as alternate for a same board.
Questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to Wheatland Family and Community Support Services.
so Laprise is currently the alternate.
Would you let your name stand to sit on the board? Councillor Bigger also serves on that board as well. And is there somebody who would be prepared to sit as alternate?
I could learn something new.
Deputy Reeve Clausen? Somebody willing, can somebody make that motion?
Can I move it if it's my name?
Yep.
I'll move to appoint Councillor Laprise as Wheatland County Representative to Wheatland Family and Community Support Service Committee for the remainder of the 2021-22 term, and further to appoint Deputy Reeve Clausen as the alternate.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to Wheatland Housing Management Body.
Just so Councillor Bigger is currently the alternate.
I don't want to stand as.
Didn't we actually vote on this?
For the housing body?
Yeah, because I'm not the alternate anymore. I used to.
Oh, so yes, so Councillor Bigger is currently the alternate, and we just need to appoint a new member.
We have two already. We have, do we
So-
need three?
Yeah, there's two, and we need a third.
We need a third.
I see.
I'd just like to stay as alternate.
Deputy Reeve Clausen, would you sit on the Housing Board?
I would, but the problem I have is the regulations that they have. If they are willing to do everything online, fine, but as I've said before, I'm not willing to go get tested all the time.
They have had meetings on Zoom, so it is available.
There was one that came in from Zoom because he just had surgery the last week. He was in and there was no issue with connection whatsoever.
Unless somebody else wants to. I'll have a hard time with this one because I have definitely a strong opposition to some things that people may not like to hear, but I think that view has to be represented sometimes. And I'll say this in public, I'm not a social person. This will be extremely difficult for me to do. I'm a task-orientated builder, and that whole mindset of that is not in my DNA. So, saying that up front,
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean about social. Like,
I'm blue to the core. Like I'm a
Oh.
conservative to the core. I don't.
see.
Social programs and stuff are not my thing,
I
and
see.
I'm being completely honest with that. I was not
Understand.
raised that way. I was not, and it's going to be extremely difficult for me to understand that way of thinking.
I got what you meant.
You know, and that's who I am, and I'm saying that up front in a public meeting because
Yep.
I could get something later could say about boards and things that I may not, but I mean, I represent a view and has a right to represent that view. So, put me on the board, that's going to happen.
I would just ask, I guess, that you just focus on good governance, and I would ask that you not, take a position of opposition to anything, but it is important that questions are asked, and that ultimately, I think the key thing, and I think this was reiterated during that board training, is that ultimately you're focusing on what is best for the board and for the region and that type of thing, and through good governance, I trust that that would be your focus. I don't know if you're willing to make that commitment.
I mean, of course, I just, when you discuss things that may not be agreement to other people, we've seen letters come before of other things that maybe, there's always arguments on two sides to everything, and of course, once things are passed, you support it. I totally get that. But I think it's important to be able to have an open floor to represent all opinions.
And I think that's with any board or committee that we sit on or organization and in council itself. Good governance involves diverse perspectives and critical thinking, and it's the diversity of those perspectives is the core reason why we're here. So provided that can be done respectfully and always with the best of the organization in mind, I think I don't see an issue.
I said what I had to say.
Somebody prepared to make a motion?
I'll move that Councillor Scott Clausen as the Wheatland County representative for the Wheatland Housing Management Board for the remainder of 2022 term, and have Councillor Picker as alternate.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Wheatland Regional Corporation. Councillor Eichert, you're currently sitting as the alternate.
I'll move up to the board.
There's somebody who would be prepared to sit as alternate.
I nominate Rick Larson.
Rick, would you let your name stand to sit as alternate? Would you like to make a motion to that effect, appointing Councillor Eichert and...
You bet. I move to appoint Councillor Larson as Wheatland County representative to, as the alternate to the, is that right? To the alternate.
So we would need
Yes.
a two-part motion appointing
Okay.
Councillor Eichert as the representative with Councillor Larson as the alternate.
Fantastic. I move to appoint Councillor Eichert as Wheatland County representative to the Wheatland Regional Corporation for the remainder of the 2021-22 term, and further to appoint Councillor Larson alternate.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Then administration was looking for clarity around Municipal Planning Commission, the local seed cleaning plant, and the Wheatland Regional Partnership Committee meetings, and the Fire Association meetings. It's noted ASB does not need an additional appointment.
On the note of ASB, though, I noticed there's a contradictory 5.1, I think, says minimum, currently 7, we need 5, 7, or 9 members on that board, and so that would put us at 8.
Yes, and I did look at that section. So I kind of figured that 5.8 overrode that section. I think the initial intent is to have that number of councillors on. So then kind of reviewing that bylaw as well, one item that came up to my for consideration was maybe appointing a member at large for one meeting. However, that is explicitly excluded or prohibited in the bylaw as it is, because a member at large would be appointed for, it was either a 2 or 3 year term. So if council really wants to follow that section, which is probably overridden by another section, they could accept a resignation of a councillor from the ASB board. Then you'd follow it perfectly. However, like my interpretation of that bylaw would state that it would be okay to have a vacant member.
For myself, I don't have a problem with MPCs, seed cleaning. Like, I don't have a problem with them being on those. So I think, and ag service as well. How many meetings is there? There's like probably 3 in that term.
We have 1 or 2 left.
1 or 2, yeah. So, I mean, to me, because with ag service especially, I mean, we did have members at large and only certain council members, but now all council's on there. So I think it'd be appropriate to have that stand as, like, have him be able to go on there too, so. So I said.
Any other comments?
I think we could apply that same logic to the NPC as well. Yeah, same, I think we treat them the same, right?
Sorry, my clarification. So for me, MPCC, Peatland Plant, Wheatland Regional Partnership, Fire Association, and ASB, I think, should not be part of that. Just looking at the words. Yeah. That he can attend those.
Yeah, I don't know that, I mean, other than Rosebud, well, I guess Standard has a fire hall. No, Standard's not in his division. Rosebud would be the only fire hall, and I don't know how many meetings they have. Oh yeah, Rockford's got one too. Yeah. Anyway, I'm fine with that too, what Scott's proposing.
Would you like a resolution from council?
No, but just so administration is clear, so the ASB board does not apply to this as well. Is that right? So is that what
That's just what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. I don't.
Well, maybe just so I'm understanding this right too. My understanding is what you're saying is Glenn can stay on ASB,
Yes.
MPC, the fire associations, and what was the other one?
Seed cleaning
Seed
plant.
cleaning plant.
Yeah.
And Wheatland Regional Partnership.
That clear?
yes, that's clear. I think as long as council unanimously understands that, I think that's the most, and agrees to it, I think that's the most important thing.
Does anybody disagree?
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Move to 2.44.
Yes, good afternoon, council. So Brian from administration again. So on April 12th, I believe was the date, the Reeve and I met with the CAO from the town of Strathmore and Mayor Fuel, just to discuss the next steps on what the exit from the CMRB between the county, or for the county and the town of Strathmore meant. So the one stipulation in there is that in the MGA is that any municipalities that are both not members of a growth board must enter into an IDP and ICF. We are entered into currently, I think, 9 with other neighboring municipalities, so villages, counties, special areas as well. I'm certain we're in one with them as well. So at the meeting it was discussed, and it was mutually agreed upon that it would be best for us to budget for some funds in 2023 and start those processes in 2023, and then also send a joint letter to Minister McIver, just noting that that's kind of what we're anticipating on doing. So in the package is the letter that is going to, or may be jointly signed by both councils and sent off to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. If there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Just wondering, I don't have a problem with this, but if there was an agreement made in 2023 with, because this is being delayed, I'd hate to see it go retro. There was a way to establish that in the letter, or is that inappropriate? I don't know.
There was no reference to do it retroactively. It was just to kind of start discussing the process and what it would look like and how we would approach it. And also recognition that there is the current cost-sharing agreement around recreation that's in place. So there was no reference to it being retroactive.
No, it was just to start the preliminary steps in 2023. So there was no mention of any of that.
And will we treat this how we did the other ones, where we to 2 members that are I guess the neighboring divisions would be on that committee, or would we look at all of council for Strathmore because it's a larger one? I don't know. We should establish that.
We shared our current process that we had used for our other IDPs and ICFs. Their CAO had been involved in another municipality with a different process. We didn't get into any of that, but we saw that as future conversations just in developing that process. obviously we can have some future discussions as a council, maybe jointly with their council, develop a process. It would give our administration some time to look into how other more complex IDPs and ICFs have been developed between larger urban municipalities within rural municipalities, because it is a little bit of a different, just a different scale, I guess, if you will, of an ICF. So I think that would be a good conversation for the future. This was more a mutual commitment to the minister, showing that we are both, willing to collaborate on this in the future, and to give him some idea. He had indicated at the CMRB meeting, he announced our removal from the CMRB, that we would be required to do these documents. I believe he indicated, and administration can correct me if I'm wrong, that his preference was if we could come to some kind of mutual agreement on what might be a realistic or reasonable timeline, and that he would, potentially take that into consideration. At the end of the day, he could give us a different timeline that he establishes, but I think anytime he sees municipalities that can approach something collaboratively, obviously that's his preference, is what he has shared with us.
Hearing that, I'll make the motion that council authorizes the REIB to sign the Wheatland County and Town of Strathmore joint letter to Minister McIver dated April 21, 2022.
Questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to 2.45. Good afternoon, Dave.
Good afternoon, Council. Dave Rhymes from Administration, and I'm presenting the Hamlet Community Facilities Grant Program. Administration put out requests to the groups that are eligible for this grant, and the summary in the report of the applications received from the Gleason District Community Association and the Carsland District Community Association Agricultural Societies, and it kind of outlines their projects. And administration is recommending funding for these projects in the amount of $27,160 for the Gleason District or Community Association, and $98,908 for the Carsland District Community Association. I can answer any questions.
Council's wishes.
Just a question, Dave. There's only 2 hamlets mentioned in here. What about the rest of the hamlets? How does that work?
This program was set up for to replace the CRISP program, and these community groups in these 2 hamlets were the ones that received that CRISP funding. So that policy just covers those 2. The other hamlets or community groups in the other hamlets are eligible for the CURB funding. So there was kind of different funding models at that time. So this replaced the CRISP funding program.
So the other hamlets weren't getting any CRISP funding previously?
No, they weren't.
But they were getting funding through the
CURB funding.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's being fair to all the communities, right? Because I don't know what gets, but it's not my division.
The difference is these were operating facilities in the hamlets as well, so it's a little bit different than just programs. So it was kind of a next level kind of a funding, because they were operating community facilities in those 2 larger hamlets. So
super, thanks for that.
And so are these 2 communities precluded then from applying for CURB for the halls?
They're precluded from applying for operating grant funding, but they're still allowed to apply for projects. So if they have a larger project, that it may be eligible funding for that. I keep an eye on both those funding streams to make sure there's no duplicates, double dipping on those grant applications as well.
Who'd have thought you'd do that?
Would there be an easier way to do this? Because I know there's going to be a request, or there should be a request coming forward from Cheadle, because that hall needs to be retrofitted in it's the operating costs on it are stupidly insane, because it's a block building. There's no insulation in the thing, and they're in my mind, they are spending thousands of dollars a month heating this thing in the wintertime, when that could be mitigated down probably to the high hundreds of dollars a month if there was proper insulation. But how do we go about, like, how does the Cheadle Community Fund, or Community Center, go about getting the funding for this? The optics on this are bad, because I've got a community of the comparable size to Rosebud, and I don't know what they get in, we've never run the numbers on this, but it's probably significantly less. So I'm just wondering how like, should not all the communities that have, like, that are in a viable sort of, like, I understand Karen Hill and all that kind of stuff, because it's just a hall out in but Cheadle has got 93 ratepayers in there. So there should it not be sort of on par with, if you're going to give money to Carsland and Gleason for capital stuff, should not, like, I may be misunderstanding, but it starts getting, like, I just don't want Cheadle to be missing out on funding that is available to them. And I don't want them not being able to get in the same funding stream as other communities are getting. So
Cheadle is eligible for the curb funding, and those are for a project-based grant as well. So they would be eligible for insulation, upgrading the heating. Curb has awarded $50,000+ to community halls for retrofits, like exactly what you're talking about.
And I understand that, but when you have them on par with, say, and I'll just use, because they're both in my district, I'll use Karen Hill as an example. I've got a community that's got 93 houses, say 90 houses in that, and they're applying for the same, for their community center as Karen Hill, which has nothing. So those ratepayers are going to, one of these days, are going to revolt on me, because it's the optics of it being fair is not there.
The curb board does look at the size of the halls, and like I provided all that information about square footage of the hall's size, because there's different, you're right, there's different, like La Alta has a couple ball diamonds, the hall, so there's really differences between all those halls. So the board does look at that when they're allotting their funding for that, and those applications are looked at with those merits as well, so how what they're serving, and that type of stuff as well.
This is a discussion for a later date.
Matt?
Yeah, Madam Reeving Council, I was just going to say, with respect to curb and the process that Dave pointed out, but if you would recall, and just by way of background for the new councillors, we did some extensive kind of discussion around this policy that's in front of you today as we were migrating away from CRISP. So there was a lot of conversation. So we reflected a lot of the elements of CRISP into this grant funding program. So it duplicates with respect to what it was before. CURB has been around for some time, and I don't know how long, but nonetheless, the board evaluates it on merits in terms of the applications for CURB. Should council wish to kind of look at, perhaps with Councillor Eichert's concerns with respect to the policy and the title of the policy, perhaps the Hamlet Community Facilities Funding Grant Program Policy, maybe that's for a discussion for another time for council to kind of look at maybe renaming it so it's not so misleading in a sense. I'm not sure, but otherwise I know that the community services coordinator works closely in terms of with CURB and all of the associations as to directing them where they can apply for funding. So we have those kind of controls in place, but perhaps if council wishes to kind of look at this policy again, maybe look at the naming of the policy, perhaps it can be more directed into what it actually is for, because it's pretty broad strokes, then we can certainly do that. And we can kind of open up those discussions with respect to the policy. But the previous council, we did have that migration from CRISP into this policy and quite a bit of discussion in and around that.
So perhaps from process, we could deal with the agenda item, and then there could be a motion to bring even the CURB sort of funding guidelines in the program, maybe to a committee of the whole in conjunction with this, and we could look at them together and just see if they are serving council in the way that we intend them to. Okay. So there's a recommended motion from administration at the top of page 181.
I'll move that council approve the Hamlet Community Facility funding in the amount of $27,160 to the Gleason and District Community Association and $98,908 to the Carsland and District Community Association and Agriculture Society as per Recreation Policy Section 14.4, Hamlet Facilities Funding Program, Grant Program.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'll further ask that staff bring back to the committee of the whole
Committee of the whole, sure.
a review of the CURB and Recreation Policy Section 14.4.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to 2.46.
Thank you. On page 188 of your agenda package, there's a report, RFD for historical support for agriculture societies. This council made this request after or during the March 22nd meeting, just asking for the funding that the county has provided agriculture societies. So table 1 provides a summary of our requests that came to council directly and the resolutions around those. And table 2 provides the CURB and the CRIPS grant funding for the ag societies in the region. So I can answer any questions around that.
Any questions?
I'll move that council accepts the historical support for agriculture societies and events report dated April 19th, 2022 as information.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, Dave. We'll move to 2.47. Good afternoon, Cody.
Good afternoon, Council. Cody Zimmerman with administration, so just going to be presenting the dust control program service levels and costing report. So the Public Works Department is currently conducting a review of policy 9.4.3 dust control and is working to ensure that Wheatland County is providing budget conscious and sustainable services to our ratepayers. The existing policy has been attached for your reference. As part of the dust control policy review, we've conducted an informal review of surrounding municipalities and how they implement their dust control programs. And that summary has been compiled for your information and attached as well. Wheatland County currently utilizes calcium chloride and a slow curing cutback asphalt oil, which you'll know kind of as maintainable road oil, for all its dust control services. These services include our purchased calcium chloride and oil dust control programs, applications for that program, and the county supplied calcium chloride applications. The Public Works Department has tested numerous alternative dust control products over the years and continues to test new products as they become available. We compare such factors as availability of the product, cost, dust suppression effectiveness, soil stabilization properties, and application methods. We feel that to date the products that we are currently utilizing remain the most balanced and cost-effective options out there, especially on the cost front. So the purchase dust control program allows applicants to purchase either calcium or oil dust control. For the calcium, a double spray mixed in application method is utilized for all applications, whereby we blade the surface gravel over, we spray, blade it back, and spray again, and that will make it last for an entire season typically. The maintainable road oil is done by blade mixing our SC 250 oil with road gravel, and we compact that in place. Timelines for that, approximately 5 years is kind of what we say on the average. Depending on the road base, the amount of traffic, things of that nature, we've seen the last 10, the odd time 15 years on occasion. One thing to note on that front is for those individual applications, the MRO is done to a thickness of usually about 1.5 inches, as opposed to what we're doing on the MRO roads that we're now doing. We're doing the entire stretch of road. That's closer to 3 to 4 inches. So the current policy states that dust control prices will reflect material costs only, and no charge is currently being applied for labor and equipment costs. Pricing was increased for all dust control services for the 2022 season, and in order to reach a higher cost recovery on all dust control products with the most recent approval of the master fee schedule back in October. The following table in the report there outlines the percent increases that we did for 2022, and that did bring us up to full cost recovery for product only. However, we've seen huge increases in 2022, so cost recovery on product is no longer being realized unless we go back and amend that fee schedule again. It's not uncommon for us to kind of go off of year prior pricing and implement it kind of a year behind as we go. The county supplied dust control program consists of just doing a single top spray of calcium to the road surface. The purpose of this program is just to provide a low-cost, cheap, effective form of dust control that we can just whip around and apply real quick all over the county. Typically lasts for about 3 months, and it starts losing its effectiveness. You start getting a lot more dust. Not to say that it's not effective at all, it still is. And then obviously it depends on the weather. The drier it is, the effectiveness will go a lot quicker. So the program is utilized in 5 main ways, outlined through the dust control policy. I just kind of summarized them in 5 points. So for our own needs in municipal gravel haul routes, waste transfer sites, at county shops, for interior roads within our hamlet communities, so gravel roads within the hamlets that may have houses or commercial development along them. So to improve road safety and visibility at high volume intersections, and for washboard reduction on some of the large hills and stuff throughout the county. And then dust control applications in front of residences on gravel haul routes used by non-county forces. And this is enacted through the community aggregate payment levy, and all those costs are billed back to that levy. And then applications of 122 meters of dust control in front of all residences on high traffic volume roads, meeting a threshold of 100 vehicles per day. So that is outlined, that last point, in the high traffic volume roads portion of the policy, be the first paragraph A, where that's outlined. So the high traffic volume roads portion of the policy is the portion that has the greatest impact on county resources and budget, or potential greatest impact, I should say. I've attached a map of all the high traffic volume gravel roads and the spreadsheet outlining those road volumes for your reference. Traffic counts were completed on these roads in 2021 and were identified on the map with an average daily traffic count threshold. And the traffic counts will be carried out in 2022 again to ensure that those roads are just to get a baseline to ensure that they're meeting that threshold year over year, and to identify roads we may have missed and where exactly those car levels will drop off along those roads. Currently, Range Road 245 from Highway 1 to Highway 564 with 34 residences is the only road being treated in alignment with that policy. along with 4 additional residences on other high traffic volume roads that qualified through car counts in 2021. And under the current policy, under that Section A of high traffic volume roads that I had pointed out earlier, all roads with meeting that 100 car per day threshold are required to have dust control applied in front of residences. So we are currently not meeting that. Attached, again, is an outline of what the cost would be should we implement those different volume thresholds. It's just a few different options about what we're doing currently, and then 100 per day as the policy states if we actually went ahead and implemented that fully, and then some different options for 150, 200 cars per day. So a few different numbers for you to ponder. Following any council discussion on the service levels, delivery of services, and service costing, Public Works will complete a review of the policy and bring it forward for council approval. So just as I guess as a couple points to note, we're looking at things such as what kind of cost recovery we want to realize, and that's kind of the things we touched on in that review from other municipalities, is providing a fully subsidized service or partially subsidized service or no subsidy, and things such as this high traffic volume roads, how we want to implement that into the future, if that's something council still wants to stay with along that train of thought, or maybe go away from it entirely. So those are kind of the things we're looking for some guidance on, and that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
So, Cody, just a couple of quick questions. I had a ratepayer approach me the other day about he wanted to apply magnesium chloride, I believe, at his own expense and do the work. Is that something that ratepayers are allowed to? Apparently he got told that he would need $5 million liability to do this. Do you know if that's right?
Yeah, through the chair. We do approve other forms of dust control on the roads. So we bring it to the ratepayer to, bring forward what they want to apply to the road surface for approval. However, work on the road requires an access and work agreement, and that's currently set up with an insurance threshold of $5 million. So that's where we highly recommend that, because most ratepayers can't meet that threshold, that they would go and hire a contractor to do that work. So he can pay for it, he can buy it on its own, he can submit to us for approval, but it's the insurance that usually is the kicker, which is why they need to go through a contractor.
If he had this stuff, could he supply it to the county and then the county could put it on for these fees?
No, we wouldn't do that just because of the quantities involved and whatnot. So
That scenario is referenced on page 200 of the policy, 200 of the package, not of the policy, under dust control applied by non-county workforces, is what you follow.
That is correct.
In that situation. Councillor Larison, did you have another question?
No, that's it.
Deputy Reeve Clausen?
Well, my division is probably always the one that gets the request a lot for this, I'm sure. My phone's always ringing about this. So the traffic counts, I'll just note from 2021, that was COVID, so I know traffic has dropped quite a bit, just for sure, but I'm sure the numbers will go up. And I've always brought this forward. We've always had this 100 vehicle per day thing, and we never really followed it before. So people know that that's in the policy. We can change the policy to go higher or lower, but we never really followed it before. It was more of a request thing. If someone fell on that threshold and they requested it, then we'd look at it and possibly go do it. So being that my division has a lot of this, I do support following the policy that we have. If we want to look at increasing the car count per day thing, I don't know how did we ever come up with 100? Was it just a number out of thin air, or is it something that is there some data behind it that we can back it up with? So at least if I got an argument, we say we changed it to 150 or whatever, why do we do that? I need to have that information. That makes sense.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't believe that there was any real decision as to why that number was chosen, other than that's where the complaints of dust seem to ramp up from. So I believe that's kind of why it was picked.
Historical data, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is important to note, though, that like the policy does say that the county workforces may apply dust control on high traffic volume public roads located within the county at the discretion of the Public Works Department. And then it lists discretionary criteria include but not limited to daily traffic volumes, peak hourly traffic volumes, surrounding land uses, the density of the residential development, the type of traffic, local or transitory, public safety, public and environmental health. The existing threshold for traffic volumes requiring the application of dust abatement is 100 vehicles per day. The way I interpreted that would be like the 100 would be the minimum, that then you would use your discretion on those roads where there is sort of that 100, but that there would be multiple factors. So I think that's where maybe why it's not being applied like carte blanche to every road where there's 100 cars per day. If we're not getting complaints or there aren't concerns, depending on the traffic, like I do see some validity in having some discretion there, but then I also recognize that that could make the application more challenging of the policy. I do have a question to administration, and you may be sort of contemplating this as well, but in our long-term capital plans for transportation, would there be a way to like take those traffic counts and take where you've identified the high traffic and do some costing for MRO on those roads and how we could sort of phase that in?
Through the chair, so now that we've kind of mapped these higher volume roads and we've compared it against our existing capital plan, and in fact a lot of the roads that are sitting around that 300, well 200 plus per day benchmark are actually already on there for MRO application. So they are, we're kind of heading that way already. And when we review the hard surface road program and that policy, bring that forward here later this year, we'll be detailing that more about how that progression will work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions?
I see that some counties use they offer the program if residents are within 300 meters of the center line of the road. Do you think that would change the volume of roads that we would need to do if we looked at it that way? Would it reduce it?
Through the chair, so I didn't include it on this report, but I did that costing separately, and I put it out to about 150 meters as a cutoff point, and it really only changed the numbers by 20-30 residences at the most, so not significant enough to make a big impact overall.
Any other questions?
Or I just thought your expedition was going to get backed into by that guy. But he missed it. It's okay.
So I see we have a recommendation to accept as information. Is administration looking for more direction in terms of review of the policy or implementation of the policy?
Yeah, so we're just bringing this forward today as information, just to try and get some discussion going on how we want to work that policy into the future, specifically on like I said, the cost recovery portion and the high traffic volume roads. The way that we're doing the high traffic road counts right now as one-offs by ratepayers as they request them, and we go out and we do the counts and then we add them to the spray list, but sometimes the timing is off and it's just not really clear, it's not really efficient for us. So if it's council wishes to follow that 100 car per day threshold or whatever threshold they choose, we'd like to approve those roads that are prior so that we know going into next year how much we're spraying, where we're spraying it. Just makes that much more efficient, brings the cost down. And that's kind of reflected in those costs on this options costing, where I just put in kind of 10% for operational efficiencies, because when you line them all up, 10, 15 in a row, you can do them a lot faster, a lot cheaper than you can just doing a one-off. So hopefully that's clear.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that idea that you have the workload established already. You got a policy, you can follow it, you just go do it. So I definitely like that. Even though I get phone calls and you get requests, I'm sure. I can say, nope, we're following policy.
Any other questions?
How much do we budget for in dust control? Off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me. If we go over and above, we never budgeted for 100 vehicles a day, I'm sure.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, right now, I mean, there is a budgeted amount, but really, with the way the policy is currently set up, we could end up going much beyond that without a lot of control with the way the policy is set up. And so this recommendation is twofold. One, just to give council the information that Cody's done a great job delivering here, but also kind of understand council's desires in terms of level of service as well as subsidy and things like that. And then in addition to all of that is looking at the way the policy is executed and coming back to council in the future, potentially if council wishes, with some adjustments to that will allow better planning up front for workload to staff, equipment resource usage, as well as budgeting, so that we can plan better for that and inform council prior to the season of execution of what the next season will look like. That's the general intention here.
So I see that we recently adjusted the pricing for each of the calcium oil and oil redo. Calcium still looks pretty affordable, but we're not recovering our costs. Should we increase the cost of that to recover the cost? Is that what?
I think he said we basically look at prior years and adjust it year after. That's how we've been doing it, so. But we can do anything we want. We can adjust the fees prior to.
What would it, do you know what the cost per meter would be if we were recovering the full cost of the product? Right now it's $5.33 a meter.
Through the chair, so on that average dust control costing spreadsheet, we have the first two yellow columns highlighted, the product cost per linear meter and the total cost per product. So it would be $6.19 per meter if we were going to realize full product cost recovery.
Gotcha.
We would have applications already in for this year for dust control, I would assume. And well, I know we do. My preference would be like to leave them for this season and then have a good look. I think when we're doing our more in-depth analysis of our like long-term capital plans for transportation, that will help shape too, I think, our discussions around the dust control, because if we are doing some longer term mitigation by moving to some MRO on some of those high traffic roads, and then council can look at the fiscal impacts of implementing this policy either proactively prior to complaints or looking at a threshold, that type of thing. And I think we just have to monitor. I'm assuming the commodity pricing and that type of thing is impacting our rates for our materials, and obviously there's geopolitical factors that are escalating that quickly, so we will have to monitor that to see if that comes down at all or if those prices are maintained. Personally, I'm not comfortable adjusting just sort of mid-season, just because we would have some ratepayers who would have applications in and would have paid the current fees already. But I do think this is something we need to monitor, and we could look at when we look at our capital plans. And it would be if you can sort of ensure that, especially some of the traffic counts and some of this information is just right there with those capital plans for our consideration, that would be excellent. And we can look at a strategy if council, if that's acceptable. This is tremendously helpful and really fulsome information, and we appreciate it immensely.
Similar to you too, I think we just need to get some 2022 numbers for traffic, not necessarily all the roads, but I'm sure there's going to be an increase now that there's a lot more people I see out there and about. And then from that, set policy and then budget for it in 2023, 2024, and just basically follow the course for this year. I don't see us doing a budget adjustment right now for that. That's where I'm coming from.
Does anybody object to that from a process perspective? If not, then a motion to accept for information.
I'll move that council accepts the dust control program service levels and costing report as information.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much for your work. We appreciate it. We'll move to 2.48, National Public Works Week Proclamation. Council's wishes.
I'll move that council proclaims May 15th to 2022 as National Public Works Week within Wheatland County.
Do you want to hear about it first?
Yes, we do.
Good afternoon, Council. Oh, I thought it was great. That was easy.
These have sometimes been fun historically, so. And I use the word fun loosely. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Brad Bullock presenting. So this year is the 62nd annual National Public Works Week. The Alberta chapter is seeking support to recognize and promote this week within the Wheatland County community by Wheatland County recognizing it or proclaiming it as National Public Works Week within the county. There is some information attached to this report as well, just about the organization and some of the things that they recommend is done in the community to support and celebrate the professionals, engineers, managers, employees, and everybody within that public works sector. It's just a way to recognize them and show the county's appreciation for the public works workers. So, yeah, that's basically the gist of my report, and I'm here for any questions. But
Any questions from council? I do want to thank you for bringing this forward to council. I fully support Deputy Reeve Clausen's motion. And honestly, I think like our public works employees do a lot of the core critical work of Wheatland County. Every employee is an important part of our team, but they are unsung heroes. We often, you might see them get to wave or that type of thing, but
Do it in the worst weather, too.
Mm-hmm. They do. And often in isolation, and I don't think they always get the thanks that they deserve. So I am really glad that we are doing this, and perhaps there's some public recognition we can do through our social media and our website and that type of thing, because this part of our team does do critical, essential work for the county, and I'm very grateful. So any other questions or discussion?
I too would like to say thank you and to Public Works. I know the job is have to do the worst conditions, and also they had to do it through COVID. And this operation, the operations of the county have ran through COVID very successfully because of our outdoor workers, and really thank them for what they did and continue to do.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move to 3.1, correspondence.
I think we missed
Oh,
Lake Society.
nope, we did it.
We did?
Yep. Do you need to go back to it? We just accepted for information.
Oh, okay. But there was an ask. Okay.
We'll move to 3.1, correspondence.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I always appreciate the backup if I miss something.
I think it's important that we send a letter from council to these people. I think some of that was addressed today in council about they still have a representative and what they're allowed to do. Should. And have it from council. How it's worded, I'm not a wordsmith, but I'm sure we can figure out something.
Any other questions or?
This is a letter in response to all the letters that were received. Is that what we're talking about?
I think that's what Deputy Ruth Clausen is referencing. I do want to note that on page 221, there's a letter, and my notes indicate a slightly different discussion than how it was conveyed in the letter, but not really critical to their response. I also think it's not under correspondence, but it was read into our meeting today, and I do think that it is important that Council put forward a response to Minister McIver from the joint letter from the mayors of Rocky Ford and Standard. I think there's some significant accusations made in that letter that deserve a response. I don't know if we want to move into closed session to discuss that, but I think it's important that we do that sooner rather than later.
Should be responded to, for sure.
Perhaps I'll move us into closed session under intergovernmental to discuss our response.
Sorry, and then the letter come out will be public, of course.
Yep. Oh, of course.
There's no point moving this into closed session. I'll oppose that.
I can make a motion and council can determine for sure. I do think it's prudent because it is a discussion, intergovernmental discussion. We do have strong relationships and several partnerships with the villages. CAO Henderson, do you have that? Oh, I might have it right here. I would move that we move into closed session under FOIP exclusion 21. Disclosure harmful to intergovernmental relations. In favor?
Sorry, that's just a part of the letter from Rocky Ford and Standard, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in favor.
Opposed? Motion is carried.